Coordinator of Racial and International Justice, the Presbyterian Mission Agency, Sharon Risher, pastor and activist, Mitch Miller, moderator of the Sin of the Sun, and Rosemary Mitchell, Senior Director of Mission Engagement and Support of the Presbyterian Mission Agency. And I'm going to ask them to stand, and we're going to welcome them real fast.
Yes, that's
Is that
perfect.
fine?
Yep, that's perfect. That's kind of
And
the
then
way to
I'm
do
gonna call
that.
on Emily.
And then I'll do the other ones.
Yeah. I'm going to ask Emily to be prepared to come up. like to call this meeting to order, this meeting of Mission Presbytery, and we're going to do that by standing and singing. So please stand and join us. Let us pray. God, indeed, we gather here to sing with joy, to praise you and to do your work, and so come and be with us. Come and spend time with us, blow through us, and lead us. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Please be seated. Welcome to this meeting of Mission Presbytery, and as good Presbyterians, I can tell you have sat in the back of the room. So I'm going to invite you, those of you coming in, to come on down front. We have lots of space here. I'm also going to invite you to not be considered rude if you don't want to hug or kiss or shake hands. It's going to be okay at this meeting to fist bump or nod or just go, hey, like this. We're going to try and be very careful, and there's plenty of hand sanitizer everywhere. We have some distinguished guests that I would like to begin by introducing. And as I do, if you would stand, I would appreciate it. We have with us the Reverend Denise Anderson. Thank you. Yay. Who is the coordinator for racial and international justice from the Presbyterian Mission Agency. Thank you for being with us. And the Reverend Sharon Risher. There she is. An Austin Seminary grad, pastor, and activist. We have the Reverend Mitch Miller with us. There he is. He is the moderator of the Synod of the Sun. And the Reverend Rosemary Mitchell is here. There she is. Hey. Senior Director of Mission Engagement and Support with the PMA. Thank you for being here. We are glad. At this time, I'm going to invite the Reverend Emily Wright forward, the pastor of this church, to bring you greetings.
On behalf of the staff in session and all of our faith family here, we welcome you to Westlake Hills Pres. Hope that you find our facility the gift that we do. The restrooms that are most immediately close to here are right outside these doors, and it is a little bit of a maze to get around this place. So there are lots of volunteers to ask, or of course ask Stacy, myself, or Claire, the pastors on staff here. Welcome.
Thank you, Emily. At this time, I would like to invite Rosemary Mitchell, if you would come forward. She is going to tell us a little bit about the offering that we're going to be receiving in our worship service tomorrow.
Thank you, moderator. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Greetings to the Presbytery. I also bring you greetings from the Presbyterian Mission Agency and our Executive Director and President, Diane Moffett, and the Office of the General Assembly from J. Herbert Nelson. It's a joy to be with you. A little bit about One Great Hour of Sharing. In 1946, an Episcopal bishop offered this challenge: how much money can we raise in an hour to address the suffering in the world? The Presbyterians were one of 20 denominations who joined the effort immediately, and 4 years later, that effort was called One Great Hour of Sharing. The original goal was $1 million for world relief and development internationally. The goal was to make the love of Christ real for individuals and communities around the world who had suffered from the effects of a world war, disaster, conflict, economic disasters. The desire was to show the power generated when people of faith, compelled by their faith, unite in a common cause, to join as partners to serve God's people, to be the hands and feet of Christ. One Great Hour of Sharing makes ministry happen now in over 100 countries, including the United States and Canada. The last time it was reported, the funds exceeded $20 million annually. Around the world, One Great Hour of Sharing continues to respond to needs equally critical as when it was first created. Your gift tomorrow will make a difference. Our stewardship is an outward sign of our Christian discipleship. As disciples and as stewards, during this Lenten season, we sing a well-known hymn, "When I Survey the Wondrous Cross," a hymn that comes from a heart filled to overflowing and includes these words: "Were the whole realm of nature mine, that were a present far too small. Love so amazing, so divine, demands my heart, my soul, my life, my all." Tomorrow's offering will be directed to One Great Hour of Sharing. Let us generously return to God the offering of our life and the gifts we have received. Give as you have made up your heart, mind, and your spirit, not reluctantly, but to the glory of God. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. At this time, we have some opening motions. Trish?
Yes, we have several opening motions to do this morning. The first one is that I move that we approve the docket as found in the Mission Presbytery pre-Presbytery packet, that Presbytery receive all the reports posted on the Missionary Presbytery pre-Presbytery packet webpage, with the exception of recommendations or motions annotated as requiring a vote on the floor of Presbytery, and to approve the minutes of the October 2019 meeting as found on the webpage.
You've heard the motion. Any second? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you. I move the following be seated as corresponding members of this meeting of the Presbytery with voice but without vote: Reverend Denise Anderson, Reverend Sharon Reicher, Reverend Rosemary Mitchell, Reverend Mitch Mitchell, Reverend Kevin Keaton with the Board of Pensions, and Reverend Joseph Moore with Presbyterian Foundation.
It's been moved. Second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
And the final motion for our opening motions is that I move that the following be given voice without vote to speak: Archimedes Martinez to be examined on the floor as for commission pastor, and Angela Williams to be examined on the floor for ordination.
You've heard the motion. Any second? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Madam Moderator, that concludes the opening motions.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to invite our General Presbyter, Sally Watson, forward to make some special introductions of our speakers. Sally?
Good afternoon, y'all. I will confess to you, come on phone, I'm not expecting a call. Your technologically challenged General Presbyter can't figure out how to make this bigger, so I'm going to be reading without my glasses, okay? But I'm happy to introduce to you my friends Denise Anderson and Sharon Risher, who are with us for this special meeting. Let's start with Denise. She was one of the first ever two co-moderators of the General Assembly for the 222nd General Assembly of 2016 of the PCUSA. She is now the, tell me if I get this right, she is now the coordinator for racial and intercultural justice, working in connection with two different offices, the Compassion, Peace, and Justice Office, and also Racial Equity and Women's Intercultural Ministry. Leave it to you to do all this stuff. Okay, did I get that right? Okay, good. Okay, she is a graduate of Howard Seminary, and because of her call, she recently has moved to Louisville from her home in Baltimore. She is most interested in the work of anti-racism and intercultural justice. She also tells me that she is tired, all right? I suspect that part of that is because her workload is a heavy workload on a good day, all right? But also because she loves the church and getting out to meet presbyteries and congregations and working with folks like us. That keeps her on the road a lot and away from her husband and their 11-year-old daughter. So y'all go easy on her today, okay? But Sharon, we keep you in our prayers, and we are so privileged to have you with us today. The Reverend Sharon Risher is a native of Charleston, South Carolina. She is ordained in the, native of Charleston, is that right? Native of Charleston, right? No, from Charleston, South Carolina. Is that your home? Okay, good. Okay, I was going, uh-oh. Okay, she is ordained in the African Methodist Episcopal denomination. So how did she find Austin Seminary to come here to school, you ask? It's because of our dear departed James Lee, all right? She met James at a conference in Charlotte. He invited her to a discovery weekend, and the rest is history. Just another reason to bless the memory of our friend James Lee. Sharon also did her supervised practice of ministry at Central Church here in Austin, so she knows her way around the Presbyterian block. Don't hold that against her, okay? Sharon was serving as a chaplain in the emergency department in Parkland Hospital in Dallas when her life was forever changed 5 years ago by the shootings at Mother Emanuel AME Church in Charleston. That's where she lost her mother, Ethel Lance, her pastor, a couple of cousins, and dear friends. That horrifying trajectory has tragedy has totally changed the trajectory of her life. She is a spokesperson now for two grassroots organizations, Everytown Survivor Network and Moms Demand Action for Gun Safety. And every time you turn around, you'll see her being interviewed by Gayle King or the BBC or meeting with presidents or presidential candidates. I see you a lot, Sharon. When she's not doing all that, she is being a wonderful mother to two grown children and taking naps with her dog, Puff Daddy. We are also so happy that you are available, Sharon, and willing to meet with us for this meeting. Let me tell you how things are going to work this morning. Sharon is going to speak to us first, and she is going to be sharing her story with us. And we have asked Denise if she would be the first responder, the first person to kind of dialogue with her about what she's had to say. And then we will all have a chance to have questions and answers with Sharon, okay? All right, without further ado, Sharon, come join us.
Good afternoon. It is definitely my pleasure to be among Presbyterians who I consider to be really good friends. Of course, I was trained by Presbyterians, so I just continue to love all of my Presbyterian friends. I want to thank Sally, your presbyter, for the invitation to be with you today. It's almost been 5 years since that hot summer night in Charleston on June 17, 2015. Like Sally said, a lot has happened in my life and the life of the other families from that tragedy. It's been a long road, yet we as a group have dealt with this the best way we know how. Unless you've been under a rock, most of you know what happened in Charleston that night. An evil person with hate in his heart walked into a church and killed 9 people, and 5 people survived. 5 people who will forever have the images of that night in their minds and in their souls forever. Can you imagine the survivors' guilt they carry? Well, I can, because you see, I had my own form of survivor's guilt. I felt guilty because I was not in Charleston with the other family members that night. I felt guilty because I was not there to comfort my sisters and my brother on that night. I felt guilty because I remember my mother always asking me, when was I going to move back home? I never got to move back home before she died. So I carry my own kind of guilt. But we know that Dylan's roof mission that night was to start a race war. Well, we know that that didn't happen. But the deaths of the 9, in his mind, his mission was accomplished. He walked into that church that night where earlier in the evening the church was packed full of people. The AME church was having their quarterly conference, and that's a time when the local churches get together, kind of like the Presbytery meeting, to figure out what's going to happen with the church calendar for the next quarter. Earlier in the evening, the Bible study was slated to start, but because that meeting ran overtime, there was a discussion about whether that Bible study would happen. Well, the faithful 9 and the others decided that they would not cancel that Bible study. Because you see, my childhood friend Myra had just been licensed to preach earlier that night, and she was going to lead the Bible study. She was excited, she was prepared, and everybody that knew her in that group wanted Myra to shine that night. You have to understand, this tragedy that happened in Charleston was not a spontaneous thing. Dylan Roof had did his research. He knew where the entrance of the church was. He knew where the exits were. He knew that on Wednesday nights, the Bible study would happen. So he went into the church. They welcomed him. He asked if he could be seated right next to Reverend Pinckney, the pastor of the church, and that's what they did. After an hour of studying the Gospel of Mark, chapter 4, the parable of the sower, they gathered in prayer for dismissal. They were in a circle with their heads bowed and their eyes closed when Dylan Roof took out his .45 Glock and commenced to killing. He shot Reverend Pinckney first. From my understanding, the others ran to try to hide under the tables. He followed them where they were, and he shot them crouched under tables. This young man robbed my family and the 8 other families of their loved ones. 5 people survive, and 5 people have to live with that tragedy every day. I continue to say their names because my mission in life is to help other people know that hate will not win. I continue to call each name because they gave their lives for a higher purpose, and they should always be remembered. They are my beloved mother, Mrs. Ethel Lance, who was 70 years old. My 2 cousins, Mrs. Susie Jackson, was 87 years old. My cousin, Tywanza Sanders, was 26 years old. My childhood friend, Myra, was 63. The pastor of the church, Reverend Clemente Pinckney, Reverend Daniel Simmons, Reverend Sharonda Coleman Singleton, Reverend DePayne Middleton Doctor, and Mrs. Cynthia Hurd. They lost their lives in that church that night. As we have just finished celebrating Black History Month, we have to talk about the Emanuel 9 and the 5 survivors and how they too are now part of the history of this nation. Their lives and the story of what happened in that church will be in the history books. Just like the 4 little girls that were killed in the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, Alabama in August of 1963. But I stand here today, y'all. I stand here because I'm a proud daughter of the American South, a true Geechee girl from the low country of Charleston, South Carolina. My Southern Black heritage has shaped me into the woman of faith that I am today. But like many Blacks from the South, I am no stranger to the hate and intolerance that has unfortunately defined a large part of our history, and which played a major role in the death of my beloved mothers and the others who were slaughtered that night. Even today, forgiveness continues to be a vital part of that first narrative. My journey of moving towards total forgiveness has been hard, lonely, and complicated. Right at the beginning, national attention was given to how great it was that the families gave this evil person automatic forgiveness. That act of forgiveness was front and center. But the tone was already set 48 hours after the murders at Dylan Roof's bond hearing in Charleston. The families gathered into that courtroom, and the judge gave them permission to speak. The first person that spoke was my sister Nadine Collier. This is what she said word for word. I forgive you. You took something very precious away from me. I will never get to talk to her ever again. I will never be able to hold her again, but I forgive you. And if God forgives you, I can forgive you. I was still in Dallas, Texas, y'all, when this came on the television. I had walked around my apartment for 2 days. I'm a smoker, I admit it. I smoked and drank coffee for 2 days. I didn't take a shower. I didn't change my clothes. I was in a fog that I could not seem to get out. I was in my bedroom when I heard my sister's voice, and I ran into the living room, and there she was, talking about forgiveness. And then the other family members got up and started to talk about forgiveness. And all I could do was scream and holler because I couldn't understand. How could they forgive him so fast? We hadn't even had time to digest what had happened. Charlestonians displayed such grace and dignity after the murders. Charleston was pegged that place of such amazing grace. But I was not ready to deal with that. I needed and wanted people to know that that was not how everybody felt. Here I am, a woman of the cloth, and I was talking about no instant forgiveness for me. But I wanted time to process my thoughts and be authentic about how I felt. The media latched on to the differences between myself and my sister because at that time our family had already started to be in turmoil from an earlier situation after my sister Terry had died in 2013. We were not the same people. And then June 17th, 2015 happened that tore us up. But you see, what other people think is the right way, the Christian way to feel about such a heavy act, to me, at that time was crazy. I decided right then and there that it comes a time in our lives where we have to stand up for what we believe and be convicted and be in that space for however long it takes. I was not going to jump on the forgiveness bandwagon. I want others to know that you can empower yourself to speak your truth, articulate how you truly feel. You can allow yourself to go through whatever forgiveness process that's gonna work for you, and then do whatever it takes. In my heart of hearts, I knew forgiveness would come. I understand that forgiveness is one of the hallmarks of the Christian faith, but I had work to do, hard work spiritually, to walk towards forgiveness. I don't know, maybe in my mind, I felt if I forgave him, then that deep anger and grief would somehow float away, and I wanted that. I wanted to feel all of that anger and all of that pain, because it would be the only way that I would be reminded of what had happened in that church. Yet, I never stopped praying. I never stopped yelling at God. There were a few times when there were some really choice words that I had for God. But you see, God said to me, "It's nothing you can throw at me that I can't handle." So then I didn't feel bad, because I had some words that were not so pretty. But on October 1st, 2017, I was asked to preach at a World Communion Sunday in Martinsville, Virginia, at the invitation of one of my Presbyterian friends. Like I said, I will always have Presbyterian friends and be a part of this church, not as an outsider, but as someone who knows the heart of this denomination. I was preaching. I was on a roll. I'm a manuscript preacher, so I'm looking down at my pages and the word forgiveness came out of my mouth. It shocked me. I heard myself say from the depths of my soul those words of realization. It didn't come as a big epiphany, but had settled in my soul. God was telling me that I was strong, that I was faithful, and the time had come. Because you see, God allows us all the time we need to come to a place of peace after so much hurt, grief, and pain. I urge anyone who has to deal with forgiving someone. It might not be the kind of forgiveness that came out of me, but I know that somebody in this place today is dealing with something of forgiving, and I want you to know that you can get there if that's what you really want, and for you not to ever feel bad about the process that you take to get there. Just watch and see how much deeper your relationship with God will be after going through something like that and attempting to forgive someone that has hurt you deeply in your soul. Forgiveness has become a requirement, I believe, for those enduring the realities of Black death in America. Black families are expected to grieve as a public spectacle, to offer comfort and redemption and a pathway to a new day. The parents of Trayvon Martin or Mike Brown or Eric Garner were all asked in interviews if they'd forgive the white men that killed their loved ones, and they all answered no. Historically, Black churches have nurtured the politics of forgiveness so that Black people can anticipate divine justice and liberation in the next life. This sentiment shaped nonviolent protests during the Civil Rights Movement. But Christians or non-Christians, Black people are not allowed to express our unbridled grief or rage, even under the most horrific circumstances. For these Christians whose deep faith tradition holds forgiveness as a core principle, offering absolution to Ruth is about relieving the burden of anger and pain of being victimized. In this regard, forgiveness functions as a kind of protest, a refusal to be reduced to victims. It sends a message to the killer that you might have hurt us, but we are the true victors because we have not been destroyed. We find ourselves living in a time where this country is divided more than it's ever been. People are living in fear and speaking out of their pain and confusion. People are being rounded up and deported. Families are being torn apart. African Americans are wondering who will protect our rights under the Constitution that we had to fight and be killed in order to have. Racism has been with us since the beginning of this country. It has reared its ugly head even more today. Hate is festering in the hearts of so many people. But I believe that we can all stand up and put our money and our time in making our communities safer and better for everyone to have an attempt at having that American dream. As people of faith, messengers of God's love and messengers of the good news, I believe we have a duty to begin the conversations about race over and over and over again. The conversations are to never stop. As the Church Universal, we can truly live out our call to be the beloved community as Dr. King knew we could be if we were willing to stand united. Dr. King said we must stay awake and commit ourselves to enter the side of God's love and justice. Churches cannot no longer sit on the sidelines while our sisters and brothers are in need. We must stand together, church and community, to address the systematic racism that we face in this country, and yet still to deal with the gun violence in our communities. I was introduced to the grassroots advocacy group Moms Demand Action in Every Town for Survivor Network through a good friend, Lucy McBath, who is now Congresswoman Lucy McBath from the 6th District of Georgia. She too survived the killing of her beloved son. Because of that, Lucy's advocacy began with Moms Demand Action. After I had been back in Dallas for maybe a week or so after all the funerals, I received a packet of mail from the church, from Emmanuel Church, and one of those letters had my name written on the side, and so of course I was curious of what was in that letter. And there Lucy poured out her heart to me of what had happened to her son. She gave me her personal telephone number. I called her and we talked and we cried and we said, for our family members, that we will continue to fight for gun law reform in this nation by any means necessary. Together, we have been fighting with over 6 million people across this country that are aware that gun violence is a public crisis in our communities, and not only the people that are being killed are the ones that need to stand up. We already know the majority of the people that have any kind of power does not look like me, but that does not mean that we cannot all get together and help our sisters and brothers. While gun violence may be a relatively new phenomenon in some communities, in many black neighborhoods across America, it's become such a norm that kids have begun to be numb. When will we realize that more people die by gun violence through homicides, suicides, and unintentional shootings every single day? 100 people across this country die because of gun violence. 8 children across this country die every day because someone used a gun or an adult did not keep their guns locked up. Not under the bed, not in the nightstand, but in a locked box where children can't get them. The sad fact is, y'all, none of us are sitting in this place today is safe from being killed by a gun. We already know it doesn't matter if you're in a church, if you're in a movie theater, If you're just minding your own business in a grocery store or shopping in Walmart, you too can be a victim of gun violence. I didn't want to be a part of the gun violence movement. Even though I talked to Lucy, I still had to take some time in my head to figure out what was this all about. But you see, God moved me. God said to me that this is what your new job will be. This will be the ministry that you will carry across this country. I knew that I had to follow that voice in the inside of not just my head, but inside my heart, because innocent people kept getting killed. Y'all, we need more than thoughts and prayers that we get from our legislators. Many people believe the gun violence we experience in this country is not a political issue. Well, I believe it's a political issue, but you see, more than that, I believe it's a heart condition. A heart condition, because if gun violence in America does not make your heart hurt, cause pain in your soul, then I don't know what will. We don't know the day or the hour we too can be killed by gun violence. And I beg you to take whatever means necessary, whether that be through the power of your heart, through the power of your vote, and let's begin to place people that knows what this crisis is doing to our country. This journey has taken me to places that I never dreamed I would be, and talking to people I never dreamed that I would have a conversation with. But there comes that time when we will face some of the most challenging experiences in our lives, and how we decide to accept and move on really tells about who you are when you say that you're a Christian. I would rather not be standing up here with you. I would rather be in Charleston somewhere visiting, or I'd rather be back in Dallas, Texas, tending to the people that needed me when they were in crises of their own. But here I am. I hope you have heard one thing today that you didn't know before. I hope that you are motivated to do a little more to make this cause a priority in your communities. I pray that something will empower you and stir your hearts to do something you've never done before. We can help in alleviating the gun violence we have in America. We can help to let others know in this world that hate won't win, that humanity is love, no matter what the news people tell you, no matter what you see. There is more love than hate. I pray that you will always show love. We must be the change that we want. Thank you, and may God bless each and every one of you. Thank you. Stand right here.
So as a former child of the AME Church myself, and as it was mentioned, me serving as co-moderator of the General Assembly, we were elected a year to the day of that day. And that really impacted us in our quest for racial justice in our denomination. And doing that work, I have an understanding of what it took for you to stand up here and share all of this. It required a lot of emotional, spiritual, psychological, existential energy for you to do this. I don't care how often you've done it since then. Every time requires something of you. And so before I ask anything about content, how is your soul?
It is well with my soul, but no matter how many times I stand up and talk about this, it takes a toll on my heart. But God has given me the strength to stand up every time I'm required, regardless if I cry or not. It is well with my soul because I carry them everywhere I go, and I won't ever stop letting everybody know that those 9 people gave their lives for a higher purpose, and they're dead, and I'm here so I can take whatever, whenever. Yeah.
I really appreciated you sharing with us. Do we have
You have what to share?
I really do appreciate you sharing with us. Okay. The rage, the anger that you felt, and what it was like for you seeing the expressions of forgiveness in what seemed like such a, or what definitely was such a short time after experiencing such a profound tragedy. And I think a lot of us were struck by that display of forgiveness, but for different ways, and a lot of us found ourselves where you were. So I'm hoping that you could possibly reflect theologically on the responsibility of the forgiven. There's a lot to be said, and a lot has been said about our responsibility to forgive. What then is the responsibility of the forgiven after they've been given this thing?
We would pray that the forgiven would see the powerful gift that had been given, because it truly is a gift. If you have truly reached into your heart, if you have truly struggled with what had happened to you or whatever the circumstances, that forgiveness is a gift. Not usually people understand that it's a gift. So they don't respond the way we want them to. You know, we hope that when we give someone forgiveness, that a situation like that would never happen again. But we know that that's not true. Things continue to happen. So for me, I gave Dylan Ruth the best gift I could give him, but I don't owe him anything else. I've been asked the question, I don't know how many times, will I ever go and visit him on death row? I don't need to visit him on death row. I have given him the best gift I could give him. is forgiveness. And so we already know forgiveness is about yourself and not so much about the person who's being forgiven, because that rage and anger and grief can really hurt your soul, hurt you physically and emotionally. And if you're a person of faith, you have no other choice but to rise above because of who you believe in. Yeah.
I think about the scholarship of Miguel de la Torre and his embrace of hopelessness as a motivating force. I think of the teachings of Saul Alinsky in community organizing and how he talks about a kind of anger that produces change. Do you have anything you can share about your own anger and how that might have been shifted into something productive or hopefully productive?
The first time I was asked to speak on Capitol Hill, it just angered me so much that our lawmakers couldn't see how gun law reform was needed. I couldn't understand how they couldn't feel what had happened in Charleston, why they could not be enraged. And because of that anger, the first speech I gave, that was the speech that propelled me into national attention. It really was. I didn't really know what was going on, but I was reading, and when I finished, there was a standing ovation, but that anger made the voice more palpable. It made that emotion come to light through the words, and that's what anger, I think, can do. It gets you from that point of being sick and tired to now you're in a position to do something. And that's what that anger and rage did for me. It made me get up. It made me think about how I was going to write an article or how I was going to do an interview. That anger propelled me and kept me going until, of course, the peace of God entered. And there are times when I'm still angry and enraged, but it's more of a subtle anger and rage now rather than just being something that comes truly off the top of my head, and then you might get some choice words.
So we have some time, and you have the privilege, if you would like, to have a dialogue, to ask a question.
Reverend Dr. Helen Boursier, and I asked Sharon this earlier, but I think it bears for you to respond similarly to for the congregation gathered here. I asked her if she would share how congregations can speak to difficult topics like gun control, and I also asked her the parallel of how a congregation could speak to a parallel difficult political topic as our southern border, and what the parallels and similarities are between her world that she advocates on and my world that I advocate on, and the churches and our role and need to stand up and speak. Thank you.
I'm trying to remember the conversation, even though we just had it. So we know the immigration crisis we have, and then gun violence. They're all people of color. And it's a shame to know that people of color are considered second-class citizens because we don't have the power to make things happen for ourselves. I believe the church in all of its holiness, in all of its scriptures, have a duty to help any person that finds themselves in a situation where so many people hurt. If it was a question of one or two people, you can maybe understand people not being interested, but this thing is affecting thousands of people that don't have the power to be able to advocate for themselves. So together as the church, we have to come together on these issues because it's issues that are not going to go away unless people of faith stand up and say, we have to do better and we are here to help. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Andres Garcia. I'm a teaching elder from University Presbyterian Church in San Antonio, Texas. The events in Charleston is very close to home for me as a white South African because Dylan Roof and I share very much the same upbringing. That night when he walked into the church, he had an old South African flag and a Rhodesian flag on his jacket. And so when you extended forgiveness, in many ways you extended forgiveness to me as a person, because I, as a Christian, believe in collective sin and guilt. It outraged me because I don't think as white people, which I share my ethnicity with many of you, always realize the responsibility that comes for all of us when we are being extended forgiveness. So therefore, I look around me and what's happening in our country, and I see the rise of Christian white nationalism, which goes hand in hand with guns. From your perspective, do we speak out enough against Christian white nationalism and how it goes hand in hand with guns and gun violence?
Now, this is my personal opinion. No, I don't think that the church stands up and talk about what's going on with white supremacy and the evangelicals. I mean, every person have a right to believe and conduct themselves the way they see fit. But when we see a group of people that belong in the same country that we are, that are doing something that is not right, we have a duty to stand up and to put that out there. We can't continue to be timid. Timid will not, the civil rights movement would not have happened if people continued to be timid. The civil rights movement would not have been what it been until our white brothers and sisters decided that they needed to be on the right hand of God. We are in the same predicament today. We all can do something. Not everybody may do the same thing, but we have a duty to call this out. Because like I said earlier, there is more love in this country than hate. And this is what we need to come out, to let other people know that we are not going to sit by and let our brothers and sisters be killed and tortured because we didn't want anybody else to know where our hearts really are.
Brilliant Elder, Dr. Carlos Valadez. You're speaking from such a visceral area in your personhood, and I'm listening to your words cognitively, and you are using ordinary language to express an unexpressible pain. Words are so important because they carry meaning. And I'm going to make an audacious request here this afternoon. Please do not refer to me as a minority. Please do not refer to me as a person of color. You may refer to me as Carlos, and you may refer to me as a man. Richard Pryor was interviewed by Barbara Walters. And he made a comparison between him and Bill Cosby and all that dynamic. The focus was on the adjective instead of the noun. He tells about how he grew up. His mother was white. His dad was black. Grew up in a brothel. His grandmother was a madame of 3 houses. And he sees things that a child of 5 years old does not have the capacity to express and to articulate what he's going through. He goes into drugs, he goes into that, you know his life story. But he ends this interview by they asked him something like, so how can we look at this thing? And he says, if you can see me as a man instead of a black man, as long as we refer to us as people of color, the last time I noticed when I was in elementary school, in my 66 packet of Crayola crayons with the old-fashioned, sharpener, white was in there. So white is also a color. And when they referred to me, I was in the 2nd grade. If you are a Hispanic, raise up your name or raise up your hand. And we're like, what does Hispanic mean? I was told, if your name sounds Rodriguez, Gonzalez, Martinez, raise up your hand. 2nd grade. There, somebody told me in a very visceral area of my life that I was different, that I was inferior, that I was dumb, and all these labels came along with it. My dad's birth certificate says Caucasian. His death certificate under race says Mexican American. I didn't notice a metamorphosis because that man is my dad. And so I just cannot, as a fellow human being, comprehend or pretend to stand here and to say, I feel what you feel, because I don't. You've gone far deeper in the area of pain. I have a theological, conceptual idea, but I have no idea here. But I wonder if perhaps we start to change our language and see you, ma'am, as a woman, and see you as a woman of God, and see you as a child of God, and to call you what God has called you. Not by a social security number, not by a race checkoff, not by what they, but what we here represent on this earth, right here, right now, as a people of God, the children of God, and by God's grace, the voice of God.
Carlos, that is quite a sermon. Thank you. Thank you. What I'm wondering is if either Sharon or Denise, if you'd like to talk about language. This might be a good segue into that.
Hi. So if nothing models for us the fact that two things can be true at the same time, it's the very life of Jesus as someone who is both fully human and fully divine. And I think what you spoke of, Carlos, is the divine experience that we are having. And yet we also exist within a tension of having a very human experience with social constructs that are very malleable, often very erratic, and don't make any sense, but have very real reverberations for who we are. And yes, I know I am a child of God, and Sharon is a child of God, a woman of God, speaking with the voice of God, and we're Black women. And our experiences in this country have everything to do with how we are racialized. Now, we can be placed into another social setting and be treated probably very differently, as one would notice if when one travels around the world. You might be having a different experience there, even just as a cursory visitor. And yet, I need people to see my Blackness. For one thing, it's because it's one of the favorite parts about me. It's one of the things that I love about me the most. I love my Blackness. I need my siblings to see my Blackness, understand that it is something that I love about myself, and also understand how my Blackness and how I am racialized, because racializations, and I'll talk a little bit more about this later, racializations are things both that we claim and that are imposed upon us, whether we like it or not, and yet we still have to navigate them. So, see my Blackness, understand what I say about it, but also what society says about it. Because, and when we're able to hold these things in tension, then perhaps we can intercept the potential Dylan Roofs of the world. If we're willing to look very deeply and very thoughtfully and very pointedly and train our children better than we were trained. Because no, race doesn't make any sense, and yet it has very real consequences for the experiences that we are having, and really does impede often my ability to live as a child of God. So how we hold those things in tension, I think, are really important and have everything to say as much about our childhood of God and our work as being the voices of God, I think. But
thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? So here is what I would like to do, Madam Clerk, if this is allowable. We have workshops at 2:30. I also have a church full of volunteers who've made some delicious refreshments for us down in the gym. We could take a break at this point. It's up to me. I declare we're going to take a break at this point. There you go. And let me tell you a little bit about what's going to happen next. I hope that we will have some conversation with one another about what we just heard. I hope that we'll have a chance to process this and talk to one another. And so we have about 20 minutes in which you can go into our gym and do that and enjoy the hospitality of this wonderful congregation. Then at 2:30, we have 3 workshops for you. One by Reverend Anderson in the dining hall. So once you're down there, you can stay in the dining hall where we have plenty of space, and she's going to be talking about more about racism and what churches can do about racism. We will have, you will be upstairs in room 200. Sharon will be in room 200, a large room at the far end of this church, of this building, where she's going to be talking about gun violence and its effect on churches. And then in room 205, which is also in this direction, on this level, our own Ed Sackett will be talking a little bit about disaster preparedness. So those are the workshops. They start at 2:30, and we are going to be adjourned and return back here for the order of the day at 3:45 here in the sanctuary. We're adjourned. There we go.